What's going on, my friends? It's Dave Sharpe. Welcome to Wake Up Legendary. You already know what time it is. We got the man, the myth, the legend, the co-host for today, Mr. Ryan Halbert. What's going on, brother?
What up, man? How's it going?
Looking, smelling, feeling like $1,000,000, are you?
That's it. That's right.
Attaboy. Got a
Living
little
large over here, man.
You are, bro. You are. You the man. You the man. Well, let's get into things here this morning. Talk to the people here a little bit. Want to welcome everybody in. As you guys know, we do this show every day, 5 days a week. Give you a little sauce, give you a little something to start your day with. Many of you guys are new entrepreneurs, new online marketers. Many of you are experienced and successful. You like to hang out and learn and stay connected and plugged into what's going on in the industry and in the world with AI now, with video marketing. And so we're going to talk about something today, the 48-hour rule, why you're losing momentum. Ryan, why don't you kick us off, brother?
Yeah, so there's this word that's been getting thrown around for the past week or so, kind of like every direction I look and everything I look at. It's called neuroplasticity. It has to do with brain-related stuff. And basically, this 48-hour rule is that, like, if you ever had a $1 million idea and then just 2 days later, you just totally forgot about it, and it's just, like, gone, like it just disappeared. Like, so that's basically the 48-hour rule is your brain is doing that on purpose, right? Your brain's taking things that you got excited about, right? And when you get excited about stuff, it creates these neural pathways. It's really interesting stuff. It creates these neural pathways in your head, right? But it's almost like it's like a wet cement at first. Like it's not dry, it's not solidified in there unless you do something with it. And once you do something with it, then it becomes something that you can turn into a habit, and you can but if you don't do anything with it, then it's just you lose all motivation and you totally forget about it, and you forget why the idea was important, and you get this decision fatigue, and there's no dopamine there. That's when the fear sets in. That's also when you have just any bit of excitement you had about the thing just totally goes away. And that has to do with these neural pathways. It's actually scientifically, they figured out that if you get an idea, if you get excited or you get inspired about something, and you don't do anything with it within 48 hours, you're not going to do anything with it, right? So it's kind of like act fast while you have this sort of advantage going on of your brain basically just being really, really excited about this thing. And that's basically what it is. It's something that's kind of cool, and it's I'm a little fascinated by it. But I've been just kind of looking and reading like on and off just into this thing, like the whole, because I get nerdy over some of that stuff sometimes. So I've been looking into it. And it's just a really fascinating thing. But it also means, right, we could use that to our advantage in certain ways to be more productive and just to get more done.
Mm. And how do you think specifically this applies to new entrepreneurs or people who are trying to start businesses?
Well, just by doing stuff quickly, right? So once you, without waiting, right? Once you get that inspiration or you get that motivation or that excitement to do something, do it right away. Because if we don't, our brain's better. Another thing, our brain's better at remembering unfinished tasks than finished tasks. So if you get an idea and you really want to do something, just because that neural pathway is going to die or whatever, and you're not going to be excited or motivated anymore, doesn't mean you're going to forget about it altogether, right? It's going to turn into, instead of that excitement, it's going to turn into guilt. So you're going to want to go ahead and actually start doing something with these different ideas that you get. So as you're coming up with content ideas, come out and film the thing. As you're learning new things about your business, go and implement them, go and do them, as long as it's not a waste of your time. And I think in those ways, we can make more progress because you're able to turn it into a habit of doing things right away once you get inspired to do them. So that's where I think it applies most to business. And I know for me, right, I used to end up in these sort of lazy windows where I would end up just not doing anything for a long amount of time, aside from the small amount of mundane, here's what I have to do, here's my tasks. But where my business always thrived the most was when I was being creative and coming up with fresh ideas and coming up with fresh marketing material, as opposed to just kind of going through the steps, right? And just kind of like, I got to get a post out. It's also why I've personally, now this is a personal opinion, might work better for somebody else. I'm not saying this is the end all be all. I'm not a content batcher. I've never been somebody to try to batch stuff. Just never worked for me. I couldn't, right? To try to sit down and make all that content at one time and then be out of it for so long and then get back into it. I'm so much better at it if I'm just doing it every day, right? I'm turning my content creation, that creativity and that flow I need to get into a daily habit and doing it all the time. It sounds really good, right? It sounds really good when people say, oh, I made, 40 reels in 3 hours. And that sounds great, but I would argue that 39 of those probably aren't going to do very good, right? I mean, unless you've got a really solid system, at least from the products I've bought from these influencers, they haven't been very good, but that's just my opinion on that. But I think it kind of ties into this, is that if I make a bunch of content today, and I wait, 3 weeks before doing it again, because I made so much today I didn't have to, it's going to be so much harder for me to create equal quality or better quality stuff the next time, as opposed to if I was just steady doing it every single day. I think that's a 48 hours thing.
Yeah. This is right along the lines of, something that I've talked about for a long time now. And it's the idea of acting yourself into a new way of thinking versus thinking yourself into a new way of acting. And if you really think about that, what most people do is they try to think, and even more so now with positive thinking and manifesting and attracting, we all think that it's only about mindset. But the problem is that mindset is built on action. It's not built on the mental gymnastics that you do while you sit your ass on the couch in fear and anxiety, which leads to depression, and shame and guilt and all the other feelings that lead to just analysis paralysis and feeling low self-esteem and lack of confidence. It's one of the reasons why I made the confidence challenge, is because a lot of people really struggle with their confidence, and a lot of that is based in this idea that we can think ourselves into a new way of acting, and you just can't. It doesn't matter how much meditation you do, how much positive affirmations you do. You may be the most powerful voice in your life, but you're still going to build all of your confidence through acting. And even more importantly, which is what you bring up here, neuroscience has proven, roughly about 15 years ago was when this psychology breakthrough happened. And again, we're not neuroscientists here. This is not medical advice. This is understanding enough to be dangerous about a topic to understand why people don't act and get no results and stay stuck and stay addicted to struggling, and why some do, seemingly the same person. And I've seen it over and over again, both, of course, from people who take our education, but also in person, in live events. I've met thousands of people over the years who, again, it's even more striking when you meet people in person and you're looking at two similar people right there, and one is getting extraordinary results, another is not. They can't figure it out. They're addicted to struggle. They're always struggling. And it boils down to not trying something for a week, not trying something for a month, but consistently acting yourself until you think differently. And for a lot of people, this process can take some time, especially if you have a lifetime of neural pathways that are ingrained in your brain for a certain way of thinking or behaving and or default things that you're triggered about. A lot of times becoming untriggered over certain behaviors from people is not that you're going to talk your way out of it. It's that you're literally going to build a new neural pathway from talking, but mostly acting or not reacting, in finding a different coping mechanism that is healthier than just getting triggered and then doing the same thing over again. This shows up in relationships. It shows up in business. It shows up in every area of our life. And so I love the 48-hour rule concept, because when you have an opportunity to, when you learn or see something that you want to try or implement, speed of implementation is everything. And a lot of this ties into sort of old sayings that we're all familiar with. Money loves speed. Well, that's a kind of a cliche, easy way to say that, look, you build good habits and you build a business through, once you have an idea, implementing it as fast as possible. Because not only is that going to build that habit and that neural pathway, it's going to blaze that pathway into your brain of being okay with testing things, trying things, throwing spaghetti at the wall, not being so worried about whether it succeeds or fails, and just taking that whole succeed or failing out of your vocabulary altogether. But it also blazes a new neural pathway in your brain when you take action on things, because you sort of stop going down the old path that you probably always have been, which is, an idea comes up and then you go through. And a lot of times we have the same pattern every single time. We go through a process of, well, it's probably not going to work for me, maybe some self-loathing, then some bitterness or blaming or victim stancing, well, that's great that it works for them, or, must be nice, or like whatever the things that we say to ourselves. Money doesn't grow on trees. Our families just doesn't, we're hard workers. We're blue collar workers. We don't do that internet stuff, that tech, whatever your talk track is. It's likely a pattern that it may vary with some words, but likely when a new opportunity is presented or you have a new idea, you likely go through a pattern in a sequence of thoughts which leads to doing nothing. You doing nothing with it. And that is the neural pathway that's blazed inside of your head, inside of your brain. It's that reaction and feeling and thoughts which leads to you either doing nothing or potentially just maybe picking up a drink, smoking a joint, whatever, going and shopping. Nowadays, I believe we've blazed a lot of neural pathways in our brains to just scroll. Scrolling is a new sort, and that kind of need to receive our dopamine through, like, whether it be sugar or scrolling on the internet. And what does that do? It leads us usually to comparing ourselves to other people. Again, that self-loathing, that comparisonitis. I say comparisonitis, that's not a real word, but it accurately describes sort of what we do when we see somebody online, their highlight reel that we compare to our real life or our real experience building our business, which leads to, again, frustration, victim stancing, bitterness, jealousy, all of these things, where if you just instead, you already probably have tons of ideas ready to implement, things that you want to try. Or if you do see something, if you're actually doing research and development, looking for ideas on the internet to recreate or for inspiration, once you get one, just taking action on it, that then begins to build a new neural pathway, for lack of better terms. Again, I love kind of cutesy sort of like, things that make people, because neural pathways and blazing a neural pathway, I don't really know what that means. Like that's some shit that I don't really understand how that applies in practical life. So a lot of times we use phrases like money loves speed, things like that, to help us understand in layman's terms what this stuff means. But I think the other one is building a new habit. We hear this a lot. It takes 30 days, takes 60 days, take 90 days to build a new habit. That's another kind of way in which people have tried to explain this to us, that you have to do something for a period of time in order to make it your default. And your default is another word to describe your neural pathway. It's your default. My default, it used to be using drugs to cope with life, drinking alcohol. That was my default of all the things that I could do. That was the neural pathway. And it was exacerbated by a predisposed addictive personality. Okay. And potentially it was genetic, maybe not, likely, but I was likely predisposed to have that personality trait. I tried it. I liked it. I liked the way it felt. It became my neural pathway, the default, that no matter if things were good or things were stressful, that was my path. That was my default. And I had to, when I got clean, this is the best example that I have. When I got clean, I learned, Dave, you're not going to be able to sit around and meditate your way into getting clean and building a new default. You're going to have to literally act yourself into a new way of thinking. And what that meant for me was, when I felt like using, I needed to pick up the phone and call somebody. I needed to go try to help somebody. I needed to go to a meeting. I needed to get out of myself. What getting out of myself meant was get out of your head. Tony Robbins has always said, if you're in your head, you're dead. That's another way to say this. And so this knowledge has been around or been communicated to us in different ways over time. And we all have examples of how we have blazed new neural pathways, but now it's coming back. It's becoming popularized. We're becoming more interested in this. And sometimes if it's presented from a scientific standpoint, where somebody like yourself can look at it from a logical perspective and be like, oh shit, yeah, this is not just motivational bullshit. This is actual science, and it's been proven. One last thought. I know this stuff from studying psychology over the past 15 years inside of marketing and just being a student of this. 15 years prior, they literally thought that your brain, 15, 20 years, this was a recent in terms of medical breakthroughs. This was a fairly recent breakthrough in psychology. For a long time, they thought that the way you were was the way you'd always be. That's why they did shit like lobotomies and stuff like that. They thought they needed to drill your head and drain it and do all these kind of weird procedures, or put you inside of a funny farm or a mental institution. If you had some sort of addiction or some sort of, personality trait or mental illness. And now we understand and know that with different forms of therapy, different forms of behavioral therapy, and there's 6 major forms of psychological kind of concepts or theories, right? I've gone through this in trainings at masterminds before. With this new knowledge, especially with the idea or this breakthrough that we can rewire our brains, people are a lot more on this train now to actually realize and believe that I can change, and it doesn't have to take many years for it to happen. It can happen rather fast.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff. I mean, when I was, I think back to when I was a mechanic, and when I first quit my job and went into starting my own business, doing my own mobile repair stuff. In the very beginning, I went from, it was such a drastic change, and I went from like, okay, you've got to be here and punch this time clock every day, to you've got to, make your own schedule, and you've got to make sure you're responsible, and you got to make sure you show up, and you got to make sure you do the thing that you've got customers that are relying on you to do. And when I had like all that power in my hands initially, it became like, it was like I had to be the best business in town, the perfect business. Like there was nothing that was ever going to be wrong with me, right? And I was up at the crack of dawn, flying out the door, getting to the job sites, doing extra, charging less, all the things everybody wanted you to do, right? And I was like, but then after a while, right? And it wasn't after a long while, it was after like a couple weeks, it really started to set in like some of the bad habits, some of the bad patterns. And because I always said it had to do with no consequence of not, of doing the right thing. But really, there were still consequences. It just wasn't an obvious consequence where there was going to be, reprimanded right then and there. It was a delayed consequence, right? So just like we always want instant gratification, delayed consequences caused bad behaviors and bad habits to start to form, right? And just stupid stuff, things like not doing my invoices and sending bills out for a long time. So then next thing you know, stuff slips through the cracks. I did a bunch of work I didn't even get paid for. Or not showing up to a job site by the time I said I was going to get there, right? Because I was, I had to take a little bit of an extra lunch and I'm a business owner and I can do that, right? And it's like all these little things. And then your brain my brain started getting into the habit of, okay, I've got this way and this way and this way and this way I can always get out of it. And so it's like my brain was naturally trying to take me down this downhill sort of like into this mess of crap at the bottom where I was developing all these bad habits and doing all these things improperly. So it does take a lot of willpower for sure to overcome all of that. And because this was a totally new lifestyle, I had a lot of work to do in order to actually, be comfortable and enjoy these new patterns that I had to create, which was, totally being in control of my own time. And, everybody thinks it's going to be so great and it's going to be fantastic. I can make my own schedule. Money's going to fall out of the sky and all this stuff going into business. And that was kind of my outlook going into that business, but it absolutely was not the case. It was more, it was definitely a lot harder than having a job, right? I can tell you that. Did I make more money? Yeah, but it was a lot harder than having a job in a lot more ways than just, oh, well, you've got overhead. All the typical things that people who have no idea what they're talking about will usually tell you. It's way harder than that in a lot of different ways. But really what it boiled down to now, looking back now, I didn't understand it then, but looking back now, it was all just creating habits. It was stopping myself, being able to identify and stop myself from creating a bad habit and replacing it with the appropriate habit, or maybe not even a classified as a good habit, but just the habit that should be, right? The thing that you should do in order to be considered, doing things efficiently or doing things the right way. Ultimately, what's going to make you the most productive. The other thing I've learned about myself as, I've gotten into marketing long past the heavy equipment related stuff was that I can't reward myself with bad habits for doing good things, right? So this is like if you've got a bad habit of scrolling on TikTok or Instagram Reels for hours and you could just sit there and scroll, or if you turn on the TV and you can't get away from it, or if you lay down and you fall asleep every time, right? You can't reward good behavior with the bad behavior that's causing the problem, because then you end up in this endless cycle of just nothingness, just non-productive. It doesn't ever get you anywhere, right? So in other words, I'll say again, if you've got a scrolling problem, you can't tell yourself, okay, if I get this content done, then I can have 10 minutes of scrolling. Because first off, it's not going to be 10 minutes of scrolling, and you're never going to get out of that habit. You're never going to eliminate that struggle of stopping scrolling in the first place to do the thing you need to do, right? It's like you have an addiction and then trying to turn off the addiction for enough time to do the thing you need to do and then going back to it, right?
You're rewarding yourself with the very thing that you're trying to break free from, right? It's like you have to think of yourself like a dog. Like Pavlov's law is this idea that when you ring a bell, and if you do it enough times and then ring a bell, give a dog food, you do that enough times, when you ring the bell, the dog will begin to salivate and be ready to eat. And so if every single time you make your reward something that you really don't want to be addicted to, this is why drinking on the weekends for a person with an addictive personality is not conducive, because it's like I'm making that my reward. I need to change up my reward system. And that really comes from awareness. I was just looking inside of the confidence challenge. Everything really is in here laid out for you. If you have not taken this challenge, I would highly encourage you to do so. On step 4, I break down the psychology perspectives. And I was just talking about these and referencing them just a moment ago. There's 6 different psychology perspectives, and they all sort of lead, in my opinion, although they're different ways to get there, I guess, ways to skin a cat. They all get to this place where, and I go through each one of them. I explain each one of them. And I explain the history of sort of how we got to at least some of the more powerful concepts that we understand. My favorite being Maslow's hierarchy, because the more that you feed your growth needs, the more the motivation to meet those growth needs increases, whereas your deficiency needs, the motivation decreases as those are met, right? So the concept is that once you're like if you need shelter and you're only focused on getting shelter, and that's really only, you have no awareness that you have other needs, you're just going to get shelter, and then the motivation once you have shelter is going to decrease. Whereas if you're aware that you have low self-esteem, you're aware that you have low, lack of self-respect, limited freedom in limited freedom in your thought, in the way that you are able to express yourself, and you know that you're not fulfilling your full potential. The more you meet these needs, the more your motivation will increase to meet those needs. So it's kind of an interesting concept, and I give a bunch of examples of people who Maslow actually studied, which led him to come up with this kind of concept of being self-actualized. But what I was saying a moment ago, in terms of the thinking yourself into a new way of acting, this concept of sort of our patterns, which is, again, your brain has 6 to 60,000 thoughts per day. It's just made to do that. The thoughts aren't particularly useful. That's what your brain is made to do. And primarily because of the amygdala that's right at the heart of your brain, which is a tiny little part of your brain. It gets activated when you feel that you're in danger, and you go into fight or flight. And so typically our brain for millions of years was designed to keep you safe from saber-toothed tigers and run from, bows and arrows and things of that nature. And so we have a thought which triggers an emotion, which is impacted by our environment. We then take an action. That action usually becomes a ritual. Think about modern day. We go to the bar, which then builds a belief system that I'm stuck in this situation. I can do nothing to change it. And we change that process simply with awareness and then actualizing, which to me is about acting. Actualizing, this is, I think, the big problem with the way people interpret being self-actualized. Everybody thinks, and you see this a lot of times with the spiritually superior gurus, who think that their way to be spiritual is better than your way to be spiritual, that you haven't actually actualized yourself spiritually yet. When in reality, actualizing something is all about acting. That's why I underlined act. It's actually in the word actualized, and it's there for a reason, right? This is my interpretation, but it's also based off of Maslow himself. And so if you have awareness after your thought, after your emotion, within your environment, you have awareness that, okay, this is happening within me, right? Then you take a different action and you become actualized based on that action, builds new rituals and a new belief system. which then also impacts your thoughts. Again, building new neural pathways. And that becomes a reimagined, recreated new pathway that then leads to all of this a new life, ultimately. And again, it's summed up perfectly that you cannot think yourself into a new way of acting. You must actualize yourself, act yourself into a new way of thinking. I break all of this down inside of the confidence challenge. It's really powerful amongst other concepts as well. And so, if you guys are struggling, or you're feeling like you're addicted to struggling, or in a pattern that you cannot get out of, and you think you're a victim of your circumstance or your environment, you're not. I heard somebody say the other day, this is really powerful, and I loved it, and I've said it in certain ways before, but never quite like this, and it's controversial as shit, but it was that depression is a luxury. That if you are born into a environment to where you cannot be depressed because you will get killed, depression not as prevalent there.
Yeah.
Not as prevalent in third world countries. But in first world countries where we have all of the luxuries, now, and this is, again, it's controversial. I love people who have depression. And I don't mean to quote that as if it's not real. It is real to them. But are there as many people who are acting depressed? You may feel depressed. Fuck, I feel depressed sometimes. But if my life depended on it, if I actually had to do something in order to feed my kids or to stay alive, I'm not going to just lay there. Survival instincts kick in. You attack any human, any animal, anyone, you come to kill them, they're going to fight. They're going to try to defend myself. Nobody. The only way people die is if somebody kills them or they choose to do it themselves. Nobody just lays there and doesn't fight back. And so think about that in terms of what you have the luxury to do and how you're giving yourself, allowing yourself to basically slip into very destructive patterns because of the luxury that you have to work on this shit, or to be depressed, or to be lazy. And think about what life would be like if you didn't. Now, that word privilege was thrown around a lot over the past few years, and it's become more popular. I'm not going to get into that because that's not the point here. But I feel like, quite frankly, if anybody's privileged, it's anybody born into a first world country.
Oh, yeah.
That's the first level in layer of privilege. Now, there may be additional layers of privilege that we could debate and argue. But the first layer of privilege that all of us in a first world country have is the luxury to be depressed, the luxury to go on unemployment, the luxury to have a government take care of us, the luxury to, just be safe. You go to a lot of countries, get off a cruise ship, you'll see bars on the windows because they're not even safe. That first need to be safe and have shelter doesn't actually even exist. You have to do extraordinary measures to just stay alive. So, I also have to continue to ask myself, how am I hurting myself because of or how am I keeping myself from the things that I want because of the luxuries that I'm just given without even asking for them, born into a country to where women are protected, born into a country to where it's illegal and you could go to the jail for the rest of your life and get a death sentence if you kill somebody. somebody could go to jail for stealing from you. It's a luxury, man, in a very cold, brutal world, which historically, before the last 100 years when we've, become more civilized, historically, where if you weren't liked or did something that somebody in power didn't like, you're done. You're out of here. It's over. Game over. So again, we could take that information and your default may be, your neural pathway may be, this is crazy talk. This is crazy talk, and go into sort of entitlement or victim stancing or whatever your pattern of thinking is. And one of the most powerful things that was ever said to me, Ryan, was, Dave, your best thinking puts you right where you're at right now. Your very best ideas put you right in the life that you have right now. And I was like, damn, that's a powerful concept, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess I've made pretty damn good decisions because I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at and sitting right now, or my thinking is good, I should say.
I love the chat. I love the comments. I love that you guys, hey, you know what? Get fired up. Disagree. Doesn't matter, because this is something that as you can go through and look at the education and look at the experience and look at the things that we're talking about here, we've been studying them and implementing them for a long time now. And I challenge you to, to implement, to try, to be open-minded. I learned another thing as I was recovering from drug addiction and homelessness and all the things that were going on in my life. I needed to be honest, open-minded, and willing. Those were 3 things that I needed in my life in order to, move forward. No matter what I was doing, I need to be honest, open-minded, and willing. Honest with myself, first and foremost, open-minded to new ideas and concepts, and willing to actually try shit before I started to cry. That's exactly what I say to my kids. Try, don't cry. Or try before you cry, right? What's your thoughts? Take us home, brother.
Yeah, I think it all kind of just boils down to, not self-sabotaging yourself so much that you can't ever make progress. Because some of us, I did that in lots of ways over my entire life, right? Even in school as a kid, you self-sabotage yourself mentally in so many different ways. And it's about just really being super aware and identifying when you're doing that, and then coming up with a way to not do that anymore, right? What's just something that you can do to flip that script, even if it's not the thing that gives you the most pleasure, right? Because ultimately it's we don't want to just be doing more. We want to be doing the right thing, right? So on a day-to-day basis, that's what productivity is all about and stuff like that. So, if you've got work is kind of like, just something that you're pushing yourself through, you're never really going to get there. You want to really figure out, how can I create habits built around these things that are going to move me forward in the direction I want to go? And that's kind of always been one of my thoughts that I would have, is just, how can this is something I don't really want to do. How can I make this less miserable, right? Or what do I really have to do? What kind of thought can I put in place of, right, what I have to do right now to make it not such an awful thing? Because ultimately that's what it always boiled down to for me, was just, this doesn't sound fun. This sounds miserable. This sounds daunting. This sounds tough. And then I wouldn't do it. Right. And then I wouldn't make any progress. Or sometimes I wouldn't even start. But then I discovered, right, once I got started, right, that was the hard part. And I could just keep going for hours and hours and hours. Well, now I don't have a problem getting started, right? I identified where the problem was, right? Because it was a realization that after I had enjoyed working on something for 3 hours, and then realizing 3 hours had passed, oh, wow, I feel good now because I got so much done. I have a really good outcome in front of me because I did this stuff, when originally I just wanted to sit around and eat. Right. And it's so so then it's the realization that once I get started, I'm going to get that good feeling again of having accomplished so much. So then it made it easy to get started in the future, right? And now I just get started. It's not like a thing I have to practice or a thing I have to force myself to do, right? I just sit down and get started, right? And that's just one example of, right, some of the problems that some of you might be running into that you can fix, right? That can be fixable, right? You just want to make sure you don't do it the wrong way and reward yourself with things that are like I mentioned before, reward yourself with things that are going to contribute to bad habits. Because that's a big thing that I did to myself that was just didn't allow me to make any progress. And it got extreme too. It got extreme as well. You know, if I were to put in 10 hours today, I can take the whole day off tomorrow, right? And I did that with my heavy equipment business. Then I would get frustrated because I would get like a roadside, somebody's broken down call, and now I have to go on my day off and help this guy. And it's like, dude, I was such a little princess. It's so unbelievable. But at the time, I thought that I was this big, bad business owner. And I wasn't. I was a little bitch. And it's like, it's frustrating now to think about the opportunity that was squandered just because of this way I would think. Like, it's so stupid. But anyways, I don't want to get on my soapbox with this, but I think you kind of get the idea, right? It's these little just and I thought nothing was wrong with it. That's the thing. That's the hard part about all this, but you can break through it because I don't have these problems anymore. You're able to fix them all by just re-engineering new habits, right? Identifying where the problem's being triggered and then coming up with a way to reward yourself in some way for not doing the bad thing. And I literally was to the point where I was like, okay, if I do one extra job today, something that would take me an extra 2 hours, tomorrow I get a whole day because I'm a business owner and I can make my schedule, right? And that's really how bad it got. And it wasn't like that forever, right? It wasn't like that forever. And I think part of that was fueled by the fact that I just genuinely actually hated doing the tasks, right? I hated that business. I hated that job. I hated that type of work, and that amplified it, right? So it made my bad habits that created pleasure easier to approach, and it made my good habits that, you know, were going to grow that business that really, really hard to do, right? Just because there was so many additional barriers, we'll call it. Because I don't know that there was a way to force myself into liking what I did or to retrain myself to like what I did. That I haven't been convinced of yet, right? If I genuinely dislike something, or it's like saying that's like saying if you don't like drinking seltzer, just keep drinking enough of it and eventually you will. I've drank a lot of seltzer in my life. I'm still not a fan. So taste buds change though. So it's not even apples to apples. You know what I mean? I don't believe genuinely that there's a way that you can go from absolutely strongly disliking something like a job to just magically liking it someday. And ultimately that's what led to the chain reaction of decisions that got me to where I am now. But anyways, right. Just to showcase kind of like that I've experienced it too, right? You can Dave's experienced this too. You can get out of this stuff and it's there. You all have them, right? Some of them, it might be more extreme than others, but like in my case, that's really extreme, right? None of you probably are as extreme, or I'm not going to say none of you, but in most cases, you're probably not as extreme as that, where it's like an everyday thing, trying to figure out how to take the next day off and justify it in your head as a good thing that you earned. But that's just kind of my experience with it, right? Talk about self-realization and self-awareness. And I didn't realize this until years later. Like it was years later, and it was just other people telling me that, hey, you can't do that, right? I don't know any business owners that take this much time off. And it's like, well, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're just a friggin' employee, right? And that was kind of the approach that I had, right? I knew everything. I was better than everybody else. I had all these accomplishments, which really weren't even accomplishments yet. And I was privileged, and I deserved all these different things, right? I was entitled to it, maybe we could even say. But anyways, right? And it all led down to a realization years later that, man, I had some problems. If I didn't have those problems, or I actively tried to fix those at the time, I might be even in a better position than I am now, but I don't regret nothing. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I don't regret none of it.
Well, my friends, there's no better place to leave it than that. Let's see you all go out and blaze a new path today inside of your life and your brain. It's totally worth it, man. Get the hell out of here. Have a great day. Be legendary. Ryan, just don't be a little bitch, brother. That's all. That's our motto. That's what we're all taking here from today. Don't be a princess business owner and don't be a little bitch. Get out of here, my friends. Be legendary. We'll see you back here tomorrow for another episode. Peace.
See ya.